Today we have with us Anish Basu, who is the co-founder and CEO of TagZ Foods. He had a recent Shark Tank experience and have raised the recent pre-Series A round as well. So Anish, pleasure having you with us at Xartup. Would like to hear about your early life experiences on how you came across this idea of building something in the direct-to-consumer space.
Thanks so much for having me, on this telecast, Shubham, first of all. Glad, we could all make time for this. So early life experiences, not very sure if they're directly correlated with, what we're doing at TagZ, but the mission of the brand essentially is to make sure that we give urban consumers the choice to eat fitter. And at the same time, kind of encourage and motivate them to live a far more active lifestyle. Because those are two things which we believe kind of go hand in hand very strongly. And one in the absence of other is a fairly incomplete part of the journey. So that's the mission that we've kind of started out with. And we felt there was an opportunity in the space and dived right in.
Got it. So, Anish, how did your experience in distribution? I guess you were with a bunch of companies before, had a bunch of experience in this space as well. Helped you in your journey of starting TagZ Foods in the initial days?
So before I kind of go on to respond to that, one of the core lessons that I've possibly learned over the last 15-20 years of my professional life is that everybody speaks about product market fit, right? What very few people really speak about is the whole phenomenon of founder market fit, right? I think if the founder has core competence in the line of business that is being addressed, the chances of hitting product market fit are possibly that much higher, right? And the speed at which you can get to product market fit is also significantly higher, right? And hence, in my mind, founder market fit in a lot of cases is a lot more important than product market fit in itself, right? Very quickly, my professional background spent nearly a decade working with brands like Coke and Nokia. Worked with them in various sales, marketing, distribution roles across Asia. Thereafter, did my first, VC-funded startup. This was a company called Shotang. This was India's first tech-enabled retail distribution platform. Ran that company as co-founder, CEO for 5 years, took the company to a Series B stage. While doing all of this, I think one of the big realizations that I had is that, at the end of the day, my core competence lay in the area of, distribution, sales, marketing for consumer brands, right? And hence, to be honest, one of the big reasons why TagZ kind of even happened to us, or why I even decided to get into the consumer brand space, was largely motivated by the fact that this is where I felt my core competence essentially lay. And it only made sense that, at some point in time or the other, old monkey needs to stop learning new tricks, right? And focus on the tricks that you've learned over the last several years of your professional journey. So I think it's always significantly helpful, right? If you understand the lay of the land before even going to war, right? And that's something that I've always, continued to use to my advantage as much as possible. So it's obviously very, very helpful, sticking to your core competence.
Great. Now, moving forward, before we talk about your 0 to 1 journey, I'd like to understand your -1 to 0 kind of journey. As in, how did you decide that this is the space you want to play in direct to consumer foods, and again into the fitness and kind of sustainability market? So, how did you come across this idea at the first place?
So, to be very honest, there wasn't any idea. Okay. I feel ideas are overrated. Okay. At the end of the day, opportunity identification is important, and thereafter execution is of paramount importance, right? So, right now, maybe I'll speak very quickly to you about how we even got to the whole opportunity assessment piece, right? So, as I said, number one, what was very, very clear to me is that I wanted to get into the consumer brand space, right? As an outcome of the fact that that is where I had maximum amount of core competence. Now, once I had kind of identified that consumer brand is what I wanted to do, I think thereafter the next step in the journey for us was to decide that we only wanted to play in the high gross margin categories, right? We wanted to build a consumer brand which would inherently operate on high gross margins, simply because I strongly believe that as a small business, if you try and attempt something which is low margin, then you need a lot of scale, okay, to be able to make money. And a lot of scale is difficult to achieve unless you have a lot of capital backing you, or you already have a lot of existing infra, right? And as a small business, you rarely have either of the two. Hence, focusing on high gross margin businesses as a small business, I believe, is important. Now, when we wanted to do a high gross margin play, obviously it meant that it needed to be a premium consumer brand, right? Which would potentially target the top 30, 40 million households in the country, right? If India was the primary opportunity. Thereafter, within premium consumer brands, we started looking at multiple categories. So we did deep research in categories such as personal care, innerwear, eyewear, sports accessories, right? I'm a very avid golfer, so at some point in time, we were also exploring the opportunity of doing a premium golf sports and accessories brand, right? While doing research in all these spaces, I think there was one thing which came across very, very strongly to me, that most of these categories were want categories. None of them were really consumer need categories, right? So personal care, in my view, fantastic category, of course. Inherently it has its own benefits, but then it's a want category, right? I will constantly need to keep spending on marketing dollars to be able to, build a strong brand, right? It's not as if I don't have premium shampoo, my life comes to a standstill, right? Or if I don't have premium innerwear, my life doesn't come to a standstill. Whereas when I looked at food as a category, I felt that the need for better food in itself was a lot higher. Also, I believe that as a small business, it's very important to cater to a very clearly, acutely felt consumer need, right? So that's how we decided to get into food as a category. It was very evident to us that across the world there was significant innovation happening on food technology, whereas in India we had been kind of left behind. All of you guys are from the startup ecosystem. I'm sure when I say food tech, all of you think Swiggy and Zomato, right? Unfortunately, that's not the reality, right? Food technology is basically innovating on various kind of food ingredients and products like this. US, Europe, Southeast Asia are at least 10, 15 years ahead of us. So, we said we will focus on food as an area. And that's how, in a way, TagZ was born, right? In fact, even within food, we further dissected, right? And I'm sure this research methodology will be useful for a lot of people on the call here. How to go about opportunity assessment. So even within food, we looked at fresh food, we looked at ready to cook, ready to eat, and decided to do snacking as a category, because that is where we felt there was an opportunity for us to create a niche brand, right, with strong defensibility, with a distinct positioning, right, and that's how TagZ happened.
Interesting. So as you mentioned, like you got the opportunity, you figured out that this is your area of strength to play, and things are pretty good in the initial stages while you were ideating, came across the opportunity as well. Then moving forward, how were your initial days of execution were like when you got started with TagZ?
Well, you might consider us lucky or unlucky, but we are one of those brands which were born just about a few weeks before the pandemic hit, right? Um, so I consider ourselves lucky because I think from very, very early days, the organizational DNA is very, very resilient, right? Today, when we face challenges, we kind of breeze past that, right? Because we've possibly seen much, much worse periods very early in our journey of building a company. So I think the resilience is a lot higher. But then initial challenges were, of course, quite a few, because there are a few things that we've been very, very clear about as a brand. So not only are we crafting a premium brand, not only are we crafting a brand which talks to the top 30, 40 million households, we are building a brand with a very urban Gen Z brand personality. We want to be doing products that are innovative. Nobody else currently makes those products in India, right? We're trying to make products which are taste first and happen to have a better for you positioning as well, and we want to keep in mind that we want to be doing products which are sustainable, right, environment friendly as much as possible. So in that context, the first range of products that we launched, which is popped potato chips, nobody was making the product in India, right? Raw materials weren't available in India. The machinery, the equipment was not available in India. There was no know-how, available in India for making popped potato chips, right? And it took us 9 months to just develop the product in India and commercialize it. And that was a fairly challenging period, right? But then I'm sure as a company, we've grown significantly since then. And we've developed deep capabilities where innovation is now, a core competency in itself. So developing the product, which nobody else had done in India before, was a challenge into itself. And once we were ready with the product, COVID hit, right? The pandemic hit. So suddenly the GTM plans that you had in mind had to be changed, right? And you had to move ahead with a very, very different line of thought. So I think a lot of nimbleness and a lot of agility was required at that point in time. Thankfully, all of that is behind us now.
That's great to hear. So since you mentioned about machinery and the capital expenditure is very high in this kind of business, so how did you cope up with the unit economics in the early days? Because as most of the folks here are entrepreneurs and they give up in the early stages when the unit economics goes down. So how were the days like for you initially?
So my take on this very, very quickly is that don't get into a category unless you know that unit economics are going to work, right? So even before we decided to do popped chips, we were fairly clear of what the unit economics are going to be like. We were fairly clear about what price we are going to be selling the product at. We were very clear about, what is the cost of manufacturing. We were fairly clear about, what is going to be the cost of commercializing the product, including capex and all that. So I think all of this needs to be part of your early research, right? Even before venturing into a particular opportunity. Yes, a lot of times businesses are born, trying to address a certain consumer need, right? And you get into it without having figured out your monetization strategy. You get into businesses a lot of times without having figured out monetization strategy or even how much you're going to be charging, right? And you want to figure that out as you go along. But I believe that kind of a way of getting into businesses is kind of going against the grain of probability, right? I think fantastic businesses that we see today, including, let's say, Google, didn't necessarily know how they would monetize at some point in time, right? But I'd say that Google is less than 1% of the companies that have been born since then. So we didn't take that approach, right? We were very clear about our financial roadmap. We were very clear about what our 4-year plans needed to be. We were very clear about the costing, the unit economics, all of that. And hence, we didn't have too many surprises, to be honest.
That's pretty much great. So as like all of us are from an early stage, kind of building a startup over here. So what would be your recommendation if someone is getting into the D2C space? They are not aware of how the manufacturing works, how to plan about their financials and unit economics. So any roadmap or any structure that you have in mind from your experience?
Two things. If you don't have expertise in this space, don't attempt it. Number one. If you still are very, very bullish about the D2C opportunity without necessarily having past experience in it, get a co-founder who has expertise, right? Or have people in the early team who have expertise in that space, right? See, the whole consumer brand space, and I'm not just speaking about D2C here, okay? On the surface of it looks fairly simple, right? You're making products, you're selling them, you're collecting money, technically, right? But then it comes with a lot of nuances of its own, right? Having people by your side who have understanding of it is important, right? So if you don't have the expertise, think twice before venturing into it. If you don't have the expertise and still want to venture into it, then have a few people who have some amount of expertise in that area as part of the early team. I think that's something which is important to be able to maximize the chances of success, essentially.
Makes sense. So since you mentioned about a co-founder, most of the folks here might have a question around how to get a co-founder in the early days. So what was your journey and any recommendations on this?
So, and this is my personal take, okay, may not necessarily be applicable to everybody. This is my second venture. I've had co-founders before, okay, and even in this venture, I have a co-founder. I somewhere believe that even before you have figured out what business you want to get into, uh, even before you have decided that you want to venture into business, uh, take a call whether you want to do it all by yourself, okay. Uh, but if you have decided that you need a co-founder, right? And by the way, having a co-founder is not mandatory, right? If the valley, or the VC ecosystem or anybody constantly is trying to tell you that you need to have a co-founder, it's not necessary, right? But if you have decided that you need a co-founder on your journey, even before figuring out what is the opportunity that you want to address, I will say invest time on finding the right co-founder, right? And the right co-founder need not necessarily be a friend, right? My recommendation is a right co-founder ideally is somebody that you've been associated with in the past professionally, right? Uh, you need not necessarily be best friends with him. You need not necessarily be family with him, because you're going to be building a professional relationship, right? Uh, so identifying a co-founder, in my view, is a lot more important than identifying the opportunity. And the reason I'm saying this is that if you have the right partner, right, you can always keep pivoting and get into the right opportunity at some point in time or the other, right? However, if you are stuck that this is what I want to do, right, and I want a co-founder for this, sometimes that becomes a little difficult and a little narrow in that sense. So first of all, I would say step one, decide whether you want to go it alone. Uh, if you don't want to, if you want a co-founder, then even before deciding on the business opportunity, I will say focus on finding the co-founder. Once you're comfortable with a certain person and your thought processes align, the way you approach a problem align, there is complementarity in the skill sets that you bring on the table, right? There is no point if both you and your co-founder have the same skill sets, right? Uh, so if I were a marketing person and I got another marketing person on board, that's fairly redundant, for the business. You need to have people who bring in different skills to the business. So focusing on finding the right co-founder is that much more important than even identifying the right business opportunity, in my view.
Great take on that. So again, circling back to the unit economics thing again, and I would like to know about your pricing strategy. As in, when we look at TagZ as a food brand, then the pricing are pretty much complex in terms of obviously most of it is, I guess, direct to consumer. From your website you are driving lots of traffic, so you are spending on the logistics as well. So it is around 300 to 500 sort of thing, right? Per ticket value that you have. So how did you come up with your pricing strategy and your products as well, your SKUs? How did you decide after building this as a brand?
So in this line of business, there are two ways of going about pricing. Okay. What a lot of people do is they basically get into a category which is fairly commoditized and they do cost plus pricing, right? So if you're in a category which is fairly well understood, right, everybody. So for example, if we were doing just plain potato chips, right, the pricing strategy that we would have taken is that this is my cost of manufacturing, this is my cost of shipping, my logistics, this is the cost of people, and that's how we would have arrived at the end price, because that's fairly standard. But the moment you are creating a subcategory unto itself, right, or you are entering a relatively niche space, right, I think what is very important is, first of all, figuring out uh, what is the right price at the consumer, at which the consumer will buy, right, and then work backwards. Is it even possible to make a product with adequate margins to be able to cater to that kind of a price point, right? So for example, when we launched our product, I think we were fairly clear about a few things. Number one, we were not competing with the Lays, or the Bingos or the Uncle Chips of the world, which typically tend to operate at a 20 rupee or less kind of a price point, right? Because that's a very low margin game, and that's a game which would essentially need us to have a lot of capital, right, or a lot of scale, as I mentioned earlier, to be able to compete. And since we don't have either of them, we were very clear that we don't want to be competing in that space at all, right? Thereafter, when we looked at the savory snacking and the chip market, there are brands like Doritos or Nachos, which aren't necessarily potato chips, but then they are adjacent categories, which is the whole nacho space. And then you have some few premium offerings like Lay's Max, right, which typically operate at a 35 rupee price point. But then what we noticed is thereafter the market straight away jumps to a 99 rupee price point, which is occupied by Pringles, right? Which means there was a big gap, in the whole price point journey from 35 rupees to 99 rupees. So we figured that what we wanted to do is give the consumer a premium quality product at a 50 rupee kind of a price point, right? Which we felt was the sweet spot, right? So once we identified that 50 rupees is the price point that we wanted to get into, obviously we figured out, is it possible to make the product with adequate margins at that kind of a price point? And we figured that yes, it was possible, right? But then instead of doing single serves at 50 rupees, we decided to do a pack which would serve at least two people, because we were catering to a consumer base which possibly doesn't necessarily walk into a store and immediately pick up a pack and start eating it, right? We are possibly catering to a consumer who's going to be buying it online on a Swiggy Instamart, or possibly from a premium store, take it back home and share it with other people as well, right? Either in office, or in college, or with family at home. So it made sense to make a sharing pack, right? And not necessarily a single serve. So that's how we decided to go about it. Even today, that's the whole approach that we look at always, right? What is the price that we feel that the consumer is going to be willing to pay, and thereafter do the backward math rather than doing cost plus pricing, right? I feel that cost plus pricing is not the best approach in this line of business, because that is again a lot of price discovery. So you decide that I want to make X product. It costs me Y amount to make this. I will sell this at Z product, and you figure out factories, machinery, equipment, and then you launch the product, and then you realize at Z price it is not selling at all, right? So that's a futile exercise. So cost plus pricing, in my view, not the most recommended approach. Doing market research, beforehand is something which is very important.
That's amazing. So moving forward, let's talk about TagZ growth. As in, what are the growth metrics that you use in terms of numerically assessing how you are growing, and how has been your growth in the last few years?
Repeats. Nothing else matters except for repeats, right? So in the offline world, we basically measure whether my per store productivity per month is growing or not. Am I able to sell more products from the same store, on a monthly basis or not? So same store growth is a very important metric, which is a surrogate of repeat in a way, right? Because a physical store has the same set of catchment customers, right? It's not as if new customers are coming every day to a new store, right? So if I'm growing in the same store month on month, then I know for a fact that my repeats are strong. Online, of course, these are metrics which are relatively easier to track, because you have data at your disposal. So there, I think the repeat rates matter a lot. Looking at consumer repeat rate on a cohortized basis is that much more important, right? Now, when you're looking at repeats, it is not just about whether the consumer is coming back and buying again or not. Is he buying more than what he bought the last time around, right? So, for example, and happy to share metrics like this. So for a brand like ours, the first purchase of a customer is typically in the range of about 287 rupees. By month 6, the same consumer on a cohortized basis comes back and buys products worth 627 rupees, which is almost like a 3x jump. So not only is the same customer coming back and buying, but then how much is he buying? Is he buying more or not? Is something which is very important to measure. So I saw somebody mention retention. Retention, I think, is a metric which is very relevant in case of products which are engagement driven, right? So if you're doing, let's say, a health tech app, if you're doing a ed tech app, I think retention makes a lot of sense, right? But in our case, retention is equal to repeats, in a way.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Then moving forward, what are you looking forward to, Anish? TagZ as a brand, how do you want to build it? And you have a global vision as well. I guess I came across an article. So how do you plan to make it happen in the next few years?
Execution. You just put your foot down, put your head down, and keep executing on a day in day out basis. Sell to more customers, sell to more retailers, sell to more online platforms. Um, we've already started getting a lot of inquiries from across the world for exporting our products into various parts of them. Obviously, that's something that we will be doing sometime this year. We've just started exporting to parts of the world like Dubai. So yes, global ambitions are there, but then right now our number one priority very clearly is India. Even within India, we are clearly focused on executing more sharply in specific cities. So let's put it this way: 80% of our bandwidth essentially goes towards catering to markets in the south and in the west, because those are the two places where we have our manufacturing presence. Maybe 20% of our bandwidth goes towards geographies such as south, or sorry, the east and the northern part of the country, and global exports. So one thing at a time. I think we like to focus on doing few things and doing them well.
That's great to hear. Now coming to a certain question around Shark Tank experience. So how was it for you? I think you also got a deal of around 2.75% equity for 70 lakhs, right, from Ashneer. So how's your whole experience of getting into Shark Tank? If you can share something around it as well.
I think Shark Tank is a great platform, and being the first season in India, I think what is already evident is that it's getting a lot of fantastic visibility, for the brands that are being showcased, right? Uh, the capital that is raised on the platform, is incidental, right? It's not necessarily a lot of money. It doesn't necessarily move the needle significantly. For brands with the kind of mission and the vision that we have. But then I think it definitely gives a lot of validation, on national television once you close a deal. But then I think is the platform in itself. Going live on primetime television, getting millions of eyeballs to look at your product. And I think the way Shark Tank showcases the product, showcases the story behind the product, it's something which gives tremendous amount of credibility to early stage brands.
Great. Perfect then.